Good afternoon and good morning. We see lots of you are joining in on the webinar and just coming into the room here. So we will give folks about 30 more seconds and then we will get started with today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Once again, welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is titled Early Planning for the Submission of AFCARS, the second webinar in the AFCARS Final Rural Training Series. This webinar is brought to you on behalf of the Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families, Children's Bureau. Today's webinar, again entitled Early Planning for the Submission of AFCARS, this is the second webinar in the AFCARS Final Rural Training Series. Before we get started with today's content and before I introduce our speakers today, we would welcome you to participate in today's webinar. We will have plenty of time for questions, for you to submit your questions, and you can do that in several ways. We would also encourage you to be engaged with the material by responding to periodic polling questions. So we will have at least 2 of those today in which we'd like you to respond. But you can ask questions throughout the webinar. First, we want to really strongly encourage you to use the Q&A function. We see some of you are doing that now. Thank you so much. So if you hover over at the top of your screen, there's a ribbon there and that you'll see a button that says Q&A. You click on that and submit your question using that feature. It would be really helpful for us. We have a team of panelists here monitoring the questions that are coming in, and so we will be responding to those. You can also ask a question over using the microphone on your computer or your telephone by using the raise hand feature. If you hover over the participants section at the bottom of your screen, you should see a button that says raise hand. You can also do this with Control Y. If you're on a phone today, you can hit *9 and that will raise your hand. And then we will call your name. If you've raised your hand, we will call your name and you will be unmuted and then you can ask the questions. We've muted all of your lines as you've come into the room, so only the host can unmute your line for you. After the webinar, you can continue to email us questions at afcars@acf.hhs.gov. So again, we want to encourage your participation and encourage you to submit questions. Today's webinar presenters will be Jennifer Haight. She is the Director of the Division of Performance Measurement and Improvement, and Rebecca Odor, who is the AFCARS Administrator, also in the Division of Performance Measurement and Improvement. And with that, it is my great pleasure to now introduce to you Jennifer Haight.
Thanks. I'm actually going to take it, Phil. This is, hi everyone, Rebecca Odor. I'm so glad that you all could make it today. It looks like we have about 275 folks signed in via the webinar. We had about 300, more than 300, the last one. So obviously this is something that really you all have an interest in learning more about. And we have a very big interest in learning what the challenges that you all are facing and what the questions that you have. So that's why we are really stepping up what technical assistance we're able to offer to you all so that we can learn from you. This webinar was scheduled for about an hour and a half. We are thinking that it's going to be done in an hour, but we want to make sure that there's enough time within that hour for you all to ask your questions so that we can understand what your questions are and understand really what are the challenges that you all are facing in thinking about implementing this final rule. So the way we're doing that is through the Q&As, and you guys can feel free to ask your question over the phone, use the raise hand feature or *9, and we will be able to clarify whether we're understanding your question correctly so that when we do start to put out some technical assistance resources and materials, it's available to you. So on the next slide, we're talking about the webinar series that we're offering. We're offering monthly webinars for you all, and some of those webinars will be recorded. They will all be housed on the CB AFCARS website, and there's a link for this when the presentation notes come out to you after this webinar ends. Our next webinar is scheduled for September 28th, and so there's a registration link there, which you can't click on because you're just watching the presentation, but when you get this PowerPoint slides, you'll be able to see, be able to click directly on there to register for the next webinar on September 28th. On this particular presentation, we also are asking you to continue to use the AFCARS mailbox for any technical assistance questions, or use the question and answer session if you're talking about right now. So today in our presentation, we're going to be talking about the reporting, population, and file submission. Phil, you can change the slide, thank you. We're going to be giving you some specific case examples about the differences between 1 and 2.1 AFCARS, give you an opportunity for additional questions about the new data elements, and then share with you some more resources and next steps. So as our first poll here, we really want you to know how familiar you are with the current process to transmit the AFCARS files to ACF. So this is the transmission process. Are you very familiar, somewhat familiar, not very familiar, or you just don't know? Any of those are okay answers. We know that we have all different types on these type of webinars. We have those of you who are pretty much program people who are implementing. We have people who are in charge of the submission but don't do it themselves. We have other people who are only here because they know the secret keys to submit to ACF and the Children's Bureau. So just pick on one of those so that I can get a little idea of who our audience is here. And does it look like we have enough people voting to share those results? It seems like maybe 17% of us are very familiar with this process of transmitting. Somewhat is where the majority of you all lie, and then not very is where many of you are, and some of you are not sure, and boy, do I get that. I'm not sure every day. So thanks, that helps us as we go forward. I'm going to go on to show you the timeline, and this is exactly what you saw when we did this before, if you were on the last webinar. However, this is important information, and to see it's a kind of confusing timeline, so I'm just going to go over it again for those who haven't yet seen it and for those who haven't quite digested everything that's coming up. So in the purple is our pretty much everything related to AFCARS 2.1, also known as the new AFCARS or the 2020 AFCARS. Any of those is what we interchangeably call that. So and this is our timeline here where it starts at May, and of course now we're into, oh my gosh, almost September. But each of these triangles are submission periods with the, so the 20B submission period is where we are now, and that submission should be November 14th of 2020. So you'll see that all the way at the bottom. And then we're going to go through, you guys are going to be continuing collecting for AFCARS 1.0 at the same time as you're participating in these technical assistance trainings and everything, planning for 2.1 and getting your systems ready for 2.1. You'll start collecting the new AFCARS in October of 2022. And a little bit after that, in November of 2022, you'll have to submit your last AFCARS 1.0 data. And then your first submission of AFCARS 2.1 is going to be May 15th, 2023. And that'll be the 23A submission. And then it goes on for those. So now I'm going to pass it on over to Jennifer Haight, and so she can take it from here. Jennifer, we'll take you off. You'll have to get yourself off mute.
Got that.
Yep.
I think I have mastered the mute button after all these months. I have mastered it, actually. I'm very good at putting myself on mute. What I was saying is, hello, everybody. It is great to be here, and we appreciate your tuning in for this next webinar. We are planning, as Becky said, and I'm just going to reiterate, a number of technical assistance opportunities so that we can continue to hear from you about some of your questions and concerns, and continue to address those questions and concerns as we are developing our specific guidance for how we want to operationalize AFCARS 2.1. We're spending quite a bit of time getting very familiar with each aspect of the rule, and also more specifically clarifying for ourselves how to be as clear as possible with you, those of you who are going to be responding to this new rule and its requirements. We know that there are, we try really hard to be as clear as possible, but there's always opportunity to improve the clarity and be as specific as possible as we translate this rule into guidance that will help you respond to the required data submission. So for that reason, we are starting sort of slowly and being very deliberate, and really depending on communication from all of you to let us know where more specificity and clarity is called for, so that we can provide the best guidance possible. So to begin with, and as Becky said earlier, we're going to start by talking a little bit about the reporting population. We can go to the next slide. This, as you all know, there are two file submissions. The first is the out-of-home care file, which sometimes we call the foster care file, and we would, well, I do anyway. And we want to be clear about who is in the reporting population, that is who you are obligated to submit data on with each data submission. And this is mostly clarifying what is also true, which has always been true, let me say, but also with one addition. So when you're reporting for the AFCARS out-of-home care file, we will be collecting information about the experiences of youth of any age who first and foremost was in foster care under the placement and care, which sometimes you might hear us refer to as P and C, the placement and care responsibility of the Title IV agency for more than 24 hours. This also includes those who have run away or whose whereabouts are unknown at the time the 4E agency becomes responsible for the child. So that's a clarification there. And then finally, the reporting population for this file will include anyone who's over the age of 17 and is in what's sometimes called extended foster care, but regardless of what the funding source, if they are over 17 and in the placement and care responsibility of the 4E agency, those youth will be reported, and their associated data would be reported too. I think we'll take questions after, so I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is also about the reporting population, but it's for the adoption and guardianship assistance file. And this is a file where you would report on those whose adoption or legal guardianship is final, and who have a 4E adoption or guardianship assistance agreement in effect at any time during the reporting period. I'm sure that you've noticed when you review the rule that this is a much smaller file than the current comparable submission under AFCARS. It includes primarily demographic information about the child or youth being reported. So that's their birth date, their sex, race, finalization, termination dates, and information on the agreement and placing agency. Some of the data that used to be reported in this adoption file will now be reported in the out-of-home care file, and I'm sure you have noticed that too. Those things that relate to, say, their disability status, birth parent information, TPR status, and adoptive parent information. The second thing I want to talk a little bit about in a little bit more detail is that the way that the file is structured is going to call on you to consider how you design your data management system so that you can collect and update and then report the data elements that are required as a part of the new rule. So some of the examples of the system changes relate to that information that has to be updated at the end of each reporting period. And those are things that are associated with some of the attributes of the child being reported, like information about their health assessment or their health conditions, information related to education and school enrollment, whether they are pregnant at the end of the reporting period, and whether they have siblings in foster care and or in the same living arrangement. So that's information that's updated for each child at the end of each reporting period. Then, as you well know, one of the biggest changes associated with this, with the AFCARS what we're calling AFCARS 2.1, are that for a number of elements, we're calling for multiple records associated with events that can happen more than once during the period, or more than once in general. So this includes reports to law enforcement for sex trafficking. I think this is a question that came up last time, and dates of permanency plans, dates of hearings, periodic reviews, and caseworker visits. So if they happen multiple times, we're going to ask for multiple records associated, or multiple communications of those events. Yes, thank you. Also new and important to how we construct and use the information, we are asking for multiple records that record the number of episodes that a youth who is placed in foster care has. So if the youth exits foster care and then re-enters, the agency will have to include all of the information about the youth's prior removals, along with everything about the current removal. So there is an exception. It's noted in fine print. It's also clear in the rule, but it's important, especially as we transition, that those youth that had removal episodes that started before October 1st, 2022, so before the 23 fiscal year, you need only report 3 elements that records the prior episodes in care. That was their date of prior removal, their prior date of exit, and their prior exit reason. Also related to sort of multiple events for children reported in the out-of-home care file, if a youth has multiple placements or living arrangements within a removal episode, then specific elements associated with each of those living arrangements must be reported. And so if in a subsequent entry after October 1st, 2022, a child who has been reported exits and comes back to care, that information also would be reported. And this last bullet sort of states the obvious, but one of the things to prepare for is that the data systems that collect and store this data will have to be able to retrieve and report it to us so that those submissions can be complete. Speaking about the file submission, one thing that you will be hearing more about is that we are working to develop an enterprise-wide engineering and architecture service, sort of fancy way, of describing a new child welfare data management system, which we're calling Nicodemus. That system is will house the portal through which AFCARS data will be reported. It'll also be how 4E prevention plan program data are reported. We are working to set up that system so that it is functional before the first 23A submission is due, so that you can test the process prior to submitting those data. And we will be providing more information about this as we have it. The next thing I want to talk a little bit, just briefly about file submission relates to the structure of the file. The current submission, as you all know, or I can't remember, 35% of you, I can't remember the poll. A great deal of you know right now that the current submission is a flat ASCII file. where essentially there's one record per child, and the information associated with that child is reported in a structure that sort of looks like this. This is obviously Excel or a CSV file, but it shows the flat nature of the file. And that's because we were asking for current information or most recent information for the child in the reporting population. Under AFCARS 2.0, we are going to be, or 2.1, we're going to be requesting that files get to be submitted in XML format, where the file will look something like this. This is obviously not AFCARS data, but it is a representation of what XML file submission output would look like. And
so
we are going with
change the slide. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I haven't changed it on mine. So this is the XML format, and this is a representation of what we will be asking from you. But obviously the data will be not employee data and company data, but it will be AFCARS data. And this file format will accommodate what I sometimes call the nested nature of the new submission. So when there are multiple episodes, or when there are multiple living arrangements within episodes, this file structure, which we will provide a lot of guidance on developing, is the way that we will be asking for the data to be submitted. I think we mentioned this in the last webinar, but I just wanted to loop back to this and provide an example of what this might look like, and note one of the chief reasons why we're choosing this format. I think we have time for questions now. Is that right, Becky? Are we going to take a moment, or do you want to?
We do have questions. I don't see any that are open in the question and answer. But if people want to raise their hand and ask a question over the phone, our hosts can unmute your line and so that you can do that. There is one question in the question answer that came through. Will there be a validation utility provided? And is that, just for clarification, Mark, are you talking about our data quality utility and data compliance utility? If those type of utilities, we are planning on something like that as you're testing the data, that when you submit, that there will be a check that you will be able to do on your side, and we'll do on our side also. I don't know what that'll look like yet. That system hasn't been built.
Yeah, that was my question. So as long as something like that exists, I think that we are, I guess I'm referring to something like the NITED, the NDRU. So I'm assuming something similar will be set up for this AFCARS 2.1, or I'm optimistic there.
Well, we like optimism.
There's also a question about the submission file be in Microsoft Excel or XML type, or both. And that will definitely be, yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, go ahead. Nope, you can say, you say it. Go ahead, Becky.
It will be in an XML type file. It will not be in Excel. It won't be comma delineated. It'll just be an XML file similar to what was on the prior slide. Mm-hmm.
So Becky, there's a question about when the file design specs will be released. And I think either you or I would answer the same way, and that we don't have a specific timeline for that, but we will. But we understand that that's sort of a compelling question for many of you. So we will try and expedite that. But we will, since, as you know, we will be having regular conversations with this community in the coming months, we will certainly update you when we have some more exact details on when.
Hi, Lee. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thanks. This is Lee Brown with Oregon. In one of the slides, you mentioned that we only need to report some certain elements for youth prior to this going live. And I'm curious about, I don't know whether other states will have an issue with that, but it requires us to add additional logic for checking those dates. For us, I think it would be easier to just submit everything for everyone. what I'm just wondering what the rationale is, I guess, yeah, well, around that date selection. It seems overly burdensome.
Well, I can't speak to the rationale. I appreciate that feedback, and we are going to be thinking carefully about how to guide states in submitting data, but we do understand and offer some guidance about what you may do versus what we would require you to do. So for now, Lee, I just want to say that we are aware of the need to develop different logic to select those 3 elements, and are thinking about ways to give you solutions to that problem that would meet your needs, but not put more burden on other states. So that's equivocal, but I want to just communicate that we heard it.
Yeah, I was looking at that wording and I wasn't sure whether it was we must do it that way or we could limit it to that.
I don't think that we have made the precise wording, but I can tell you is that we can't require you to submit more than that. We cannot require that.
Thank you.
Rush, did we have any other questions on the phone?
No, no more hands are raised right now. Only questions are through the Q&A.
Okay. Then we can.
So there are a couple of other questions. Why don't we can either answer them now or later, but do you want to move on? I mean, answer them, write answers or move on.
I didn't look at those. It does it. Is the limited data requirement for episodes that ended prior to October 2022? Yes. So yes, and I'm going to give a case example that's going to give much more, hopefully shine more light on what we're asking for that one. Okay. All right, Phil, if we want to start on the case examples and move to the next slide. So these are some case examples specifically just to show some of the differences between what's included in AFCARS 2.1 and what would have been done in AFCARS 1.0. These dates are all, don't really make sense if you're thinking about it because some of them would only be in one. But if this particular case of Jessie White, if she were now, or if she was while 1.0 was implemented or 2.1, I'm going to show the differences there. So Jessie is 10 years old. She was removed on August 10th due to physical abuse and placed in a foster home. She was then discharged on February 10th to reunification. On April 10th, she was then again removed from her parents due to physical abuse and placed in a foster home. And on May 10th of 20, she was placed in a group home. So those are the facts we're working with. And Phil, pay attention here because I might be making us go back and forth on the slides. I don't know. But the next slide is the AFCARS 1.0 record. So this is what you would have been submitting if this all happened during an AFCARS 1.0 child record. So the element number 6 is the date of birth of August 30th, 2010, because she is 10 years old and her birthday was yesterday. So that actually piece wouldn't change, but then there's element number 18, which is the date of first removal. So you would see that in 1.0. There's element number 19, the total number of removals that happened to her, that becomes 2. There's the discharge from the discharge of the date of the last removal, which was February 10th was the last removal date. And the last discharge date of the last episode, and then the date of the last removal of April 10th, 2020. Now it gets to the end of the reporting period, so the placement date that she's in the current setting would be 5/10/2020. It also asks in element number 24 the number of previous settings in the episode, which would be 2. And number 44, the current placement setting, she's in a group home, because at the end of that reporting period, she is in a group home. And then she has the date of discharge from foster care, and that is not, there's no response for that because she's still in the group home. So that's our AFCARS 1.0 record. So we're going to go to the next slide, and this is a visual. Again, you all saw the XML format, which was the nesting sort of function. So this is just a visual of showing us how the information in the 2.1 child record for the same person, Jessie White, would be collected. So her date of birth would be the same there at August 30th, 2010. And she had a removal on August 10th, 2019. And you can see as you go down under that removal, there's the line for the date of child's removal, date of living arrangement, foster family type, or other, and the date of exit. Following that branch of the tree, all of those are related to that date of child's removal. And you can see when she exited that. So this is all going to be included in the 2.1 record. But she also had another date of removal on April 10th, 2020. And within that removal, you see there's 2 trees or roots or something. One, she had a living arrangement in the foster home of April 10th, where she was with she was with a relative on April 10th, in a foster home with a relative, yes. And then on May 10th, she was moved to a group home, which was staff operated, which is one of the choices in AFCARS 2.1. And as of the end of the reporting period, there's no date of exit. She is still there. So you can see this looks a lot different than if you just go once back, slide to this table format that was what would be submitted for AFCARS 1.0. So it's information that covers the same child, but there's much more information that is covered in the next slide. So we'll go to slide 21. And you can see how that is collected. So at the date of child's removal, you're going to collect everything on the child removal. And if there are multiple removals, there would be, you could add many, many more branches of this tree. And everything on the date of living arrangement. So you can see the removal that happened on April 10th had 2 different living arrangements that happened underneath that child's removal, April 10th and May 10th. So I'm going to move on to our next case record. And this one I put in here about Sam Frank to illustrate about the collection of multiple dates and multiple inputs. So Sam has a date of birth of October 5th, 2020, and was removed on that same date. He also had monthly visits with the caseworker, which were mostly at his foster care location. And as a note, when we're trying to think of how AFCARS 1.0 is different from 2.1, AFCARS 1.0 doesn't even collect anything on caseworker visits. So none of that is in 1.0, but it's now we're collecting it in 2.1. So on the next slide, we're going to see this AFCARS child record for 2.1. And there was one date of living arrangement, which is also the date of removal and the date of living arrangement, but just for ease's sake, this is how I put on the slide. So that October 5th is under the date of removal, and it is the date of living arrangement. And then there were monthly caseworker visits for this child, dear Sam. So November 5th, December 5th, January 5th, and all of this is going to be collected in the AFCARS 2.1 case submission. And then the caseworker visit location of the child residence, except February 5th, March 5th, it ended up being in another location, but all of this is going to be collected. So you'll see multiple dates for each of these caseworker visit dates. So this element has to be set up not to have one date that is overwritten each submission period, but in that submission period, you can see there's going to be at least 6 dates in that one submission period. So we're going to go on to Damian Jones. This is our third case example to illustrate reporting removals before and after 2.1. So specifically, we had a question come up in the Q&As that I said the case example would hit, and that's this one. So the date of birth for Damien is 10/30/2020, and he was removed at birth and placed with relatives. He was reunited with a parent on November 30th, 2020, and then removed a second time on December 30th, 2021, and placed with a married couple in a therapeutic foster home. So on the next page, this shows if Damien were if this was only occurring in AFCARS 1.0 and AFCARS 2.1 didn't even exist, this is exactly what it would look like. You would have the date of birth of 10/30, the date of first removal from home is 10/30, the total number of removals is 1, the date of latest removal is 10/30, the placement date in the current setting is the same date, and the current placement setting as a foster family home with the relative, and the date of discharge from foster care being 11/30/2020. But then when we go to AFCARS 2.1 child record for 22A, then this is just a quick show of this is a child that is going to be submitted in the 22A file. So here, of course, all of the information on the removal that happens within the 22A collection period is that third column there. So the 12/30, the therapeutic foster home, in a family home to a married couple to non-relatives. There's 2 dates of the periodic review. All of that is what's would be reported in the 2.1, but you would also report this removal that happened before October 2022. And that would be that removal that happened on October 30th of 2020. But we only need the 3 elements for that, which is this one, the date of exit of 11/30/2020, and the exit reason of living with other relatives. But still, all of this would be within that child's record for Damien Jones. And that was a specific question that was brought up both in the Q&A and on the phone, that we're still grappling with the best guidance to give to you all there. So those are the 3 case examples that I have for you. So at this point, I'll stop and see if there are any questions that you all want to bring up with us now. I haven't looked in the question box, so hopefully my colleagues have been searching and find any. I don't know if you have any questions on the phone, you can raise your hand and you can ask that on the phone after the host unmutes your line. Phil or Jennifer, are you guys seeing any questions?
So there are a number of questions. So while we wait to see if anyone's going to raise their hand, I'll read a few of them off. One of the questions is about slide 21, the last box. Should it be empty or a 0 value? I think that relates to what you would report now. It's blank because the child hasn't been removed. So I think, and one of my colleagues on the data team can confirm, but I think in that case, if the child is still in care as of the end of the period, right? Is that, am I understanding this right? It would be a blank. So slide 21, is this slide 21 or is this?
Yeah, Phil moved back to it.
Okay. So
and that,
oh, go ahead, Becky.
No, go ahead, you were going down.
If the child has not exited, then there would be no value reported. I just want to make sure that's the circumstance.
Right, because and that's what I understand too, but this will all be when we have more information. There will be a document with a technical bulletin that will give all of these applicable responses and what they all mean. So that will be coming out. We're just looking at it quickly now.
The second question is, can we provide all of the data anyway for children removed before 10/20? I think it's really 10/20/22. Or should we remove it even if we have it? We will provide specific answer to that question. Like I said before, that's really on our mind, and we're not trying to create difficulty for the state. So we will answer that specific question after we've come to a conclusive answer internally. Okay, and then the next is a couple of very specific questions, which we will answer. I don't want to answer it off the cuff or on the fly, so we will provide specific answers to two scenarios that are specific to one region, but I'm sure common to many, about what we'd report if hospitalizations change over the course of an episode, and a specific conversation about older youth, question about older youth. More questions about when we might have a record layout available. I just can't answer that right away, but it is a priority for us. So, and when we next get together, we'll try to have a more precise answer to that. Somebody wanted to see the last example slide again for 2.1 data.
Slide 26, yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the person who asked that, was there a question, or you just wanted the opportunity to look at it for a little bit of time? I mean, if there's a question, you should raise your hand. But if you just want to absorb it, we'll leave it up.
Hi, Jennifer. We have a raised hand from Mark.
Okay.
Hi, Jennifer and Rebecca. So my question is in regards to the historical placement and removal episodes. So if I understand it correctly, if a child enters care a second time, not within the same reporting period, but maybe it's 2 years down the road, the expectation is that we provide all historical placement and removal information. Is that correct?
All historical placement and removal information from the prior episode, as long as it was after October 1st, 2022. Yes.
Okay. Now the question that I have is about, it's going to sound silly. It's a why question. Why did we go that route? If we are providing you, so for any new kiddo that comes in after October 2022, you're going to have that historical information for that kiddo going forward. Now, when that kiddo exits care, obviously that child will no longer be in the data set. But if once they re-enter care again, they will then resume being in that data set. I'm just curious as to why we're going to re-report that information that was already reported from a prior period. So it's just kind of redundant work, in my opinion.
I hear that. I hear what you're saying, and I can't answer a why question on the fly, but I will think about. I mean, there are opportunities, of course, to get more updated current data, and since our intention is to use all of the information that we are collecting, that includes both the current information about the child, but also what has characterized his or her prior events in care, we want it to be as accurate as possible. So that's one note that I will make. But we will come back to the why question when I can spend a little more time thinking about it.
I mean, the one concern I have is the prospect of being inconsistent, right? So you're talking, so within the first 2 years, you're only talking 2 years of data. AFCARS has been around for God knows how long now, and you're talking now 10, 15, 20 years down the road. That's a lot of information that could, I mean, anywhere from an 18-year period, the kiddo coming back into care, that's a lot of information that you run the risk of having inconsistent data. And I just don't want to have a situation where I have to now defend, why didn't we report this back in if we're in 2025, why didn't I report it this way in 2022 when I should have? I don't want to have to resubmit data because of new information. Does that make sense?
I think so. And I'll consider that. But I think, I mean, yeah, like I said, I think, Mark, if you would be willing to type, did you type that question? If you put that question in the Q&A, we'll make sure that we have
that was way too much to type. That was way too much to type.
Well,
yes,
you can just I will. Why don't you just type why and we'll know.
I will
again.
do that. I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thanks. We are keeping a list. You can go on to the next slide. We are keeping a list of questions, and I'm calling it an informal question bank of all the questions that are coming in through these webinars, the questions that are coming into the AFCARS mailbox, and some of you who have just asked questions directly to me. I'm trying to keep them all together so that as we are writing and drafting our technical assistance materials, which might look like a technical assistance bulletin, it might look like other guidance that we put out, it might look like an FAQ that we put online, something that we put out, we'll make sure that we're addressing those questions. So we need your questions in order for us to do our work. Right now, we're working on operationally defining some of these elements. And as we sit around our table at the Fed level and talk about what we think this means, if we don't have the information from you all about where you're being challenged or your specific questions about, someone in the Q&A wrote something about a hospitalization. I didn't read the question, I just saw that. And so those are the type of questions of what to do if that we would need from you all so that we can provide the best guidance we can on the front end to try to help everyone. And so the way we do that is to get the questions from you. So this is an opportunity. I know you all have been asking questions throughout the webinar, which is great. But again, I'm just putting this slide up here as an opportunity to you all to continue to ask questions, and you can move to the next slide. You can see that we are, these are the categories that that have sort of come up around what people are asking thus far. These are like the top 6 categories that have come in around the file submission process, compliance and penalties, lots of questions about that, the ICWA related elements, the juvenile justice, pregnant and parenting teens, and child sex. Those are the ones that just categorizing questions. Those are some things that are top up there. So if you all have other questions, we will be sure, I'll go over these last 2 slides and we'll take questions right after that, since we just paused for questions a little bit. So we'll look into the resources, and on the next slide, you will see CWIS is available here, and this is the same the slide that we had in another webinar. We do have someone on the line who can answer any specific question about CWIS, but I'll just go over this quickly. But if you have another question, feel free to type it in or raise your hand. That the Title IV funding is available to enhance or develop the state's CWIS or your non-CWIS information systems in order to report for AFCARS. The agencies may request funding to enhance your information system through the advanced planning document, also known as the APD process. So contact your DSS, your Department of State Systems Analyst, for guidance on requesting funding if you're needing that. And if you need a list of your assigned analysts, it's there at that website, which you'll be able to click on when you open up the presentation slideshow when it's sent out after this. So some of the resources here, our AFCARS website is kept up to date, so it has the final rule. It's going to have all of our technical assistance guidance. It has a new page. That's our AFCARS Webinar and Training Materials website, and that's where, as soon as it's available, we're going to put all the information and the recordings, if it's recorded, and the presentation materials from the older webinars, so that you can see those and be able to register for the new webinars. That'll all be on that page. If you're looking for the Code of Federal Regulations that has all of the new AFCARS 2.1 regulations in it and the requirements, that's the current ECFR that you can click on there. That's a very long web address. If you're looking for the IM related to this, there's the link for that. And then any questions, send it into the AFCARS resource mailbox. Those come not only to me, but Jennifer gets those. A few of the others that are on this call right now see that, and we're able to best address those. And if I don't respond right back with an answer, that means I've added it to the question bank, and we will be using that to inform our technical assistance materials. So at this point, I'll open it to question and answers again, or questions, and see if there's any questions from raised hands or anything in the Q&A box, if Phil or Jennifer can let me know.
There are no questions in the Q&A box at the moment. There are a couple of other very specific questions that we have documented and will provide answers to that are related to specific elements and how to define them.
Okay.
Hi, Rebecca. Mark has his hand raised.
Mark.
Mistake. Sorry. Ignore me. I never lowered it.
Oh, that's okay. Okay. Then I will go on to the last. This is a quick poll for you all, so you can launch this poll. This gives us just quick feedback on how these webinars are going, and as you know, we're scheduling them monthly, so all of your feedback is helpful for us to do other ones. There's an evaluation survey that's really, it's quick, it's like 5 minutes, and I really mean that. So in the chat box, my colleagues are going to put a link to that survey, so you can just click on it, or just open up the chat, click on it, and do it right now. Or you can wait until I send out the follow-up email to this webinar, and it'll have a specific link into that. You can do either of those. But particularly, I want you to know how helpful was this webinar. Was it very helpful, somewhat helpful, neither helpful nor unhelpful, somewhat unhelpful, or very unhelpful? We want to hear what you say and give us this quick feedback. I will share the poll results so that you all can see if others are finding this helpful. And oh, I thought that had already been released. Okay. I guess it's just been put up there now. So you get to click on whichever one fits for you. And you will go ahead and close out that poll, Rush, and show the answers so we can see. Very helpful, somewhat helpful. And then we've got 15% that are finding it somewhat unhelpful and neither helpful nor unhelpful. So it's good to have that quick feedback. We appreciate that, and look out for an email from me, which will have the evaluation link, the registration link for September 28th, and it will have the handouts to this session. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.